So far, so good. But must we not next examine what the consequences must be if the one is not? Yes, we must. What then would this hypothesis be if one is not? Does it differ at all from this hypothesis if not one is not? Of course it differs. Does it merely differ, or is saying if not one is not the complete opposite of saying if one is not? The complete opposite. What if someone were to say if largeness is not, or if smallness is not, or anything else like that? Would it be clear in each case that what he is saying is not is something different? Certainly. So now, too, whenever he says, if one is not, isn't it clear that what he says is not is different from the others? Don't we recognise what he means? We do. So he speaks of something, in the first place, knowable, and in the second, different from the others. Whenever he says one, whether he attaches being or not being to it, for we still know what thing is said not to be, and that it is different from the others. Isn't that so? Necessarily. Then we must state from the beginning as follows what must be the case, if one is not. First, as it seems, this must be so for it, that there is knowledge of it. Otherwise, we don't even know what is meant when someone says, if one is not. True. And it must be the case that the others are different from it, or else it isn't said to be different from them. Certainly. Therefore, difference in kind pertains to it, in addition to knowledge. For someone doesn't speak of the difference in kind of the others when he says that the one is different from the others, but of that thing's difference in kind, apparently. Furthermore, the one that is not partakes of that, and of something, this, to this, these, and so on. For the one could not be mentioned, nor could things be different from the one, nor could anything belong to it, or be of it, nor could it be said to be anything, unless it had a share of something and the rest. That's right. The one can't be, if in fact it is not, but nothing prevents it from partaking of many things. Indeed, it's even necessary, if in fact it's that one, and not another, that is not. If, however, neither the one nor that is not to be, but the account is about something else, we shouldn't even utter a sound. But if that one, and not another, is posited not to be, it must have a share of that, and of many other things, quite certainly. So it has unlikeness, too, in relation to the others, for things other than the one, since they are different, would also be different in kind, yes. And aren't things different in kind, other in kind? Doubtless. And aren't things other in kind unlike? Unlike, certainly. Well then, if in fact they are unlike the one, clearly things unlike would be unlike and unlike. Clearly. So the one would also have unlikeness, in relation to which the others are unlike it. So it seems. But then, if it has unlikeness to the others, must it not have likeness to itself? How so? If the one has unlikeness to one, the argument would surely not be about something of the same kind as the one, nor would the hypothesis be about one, but about something other than one. Certainly. But it must not be. No, indeed. Therefore the one must have likeness of itself to itself. It must. Furthermore, it is not equal to the others either. For if it were equal, it would then both be and be like them in respect of equality. But those are both impossible, if in fact one is not. Impossible. Since it is not equal to the others, must not the others, too, be not equal to it? Necessarily. Aren't things that are not equal unequal? Yes. And aren't things unequal to something unequal? Doubtless. So the one partakes also of inequality, in relation to which the others are unequal to it. It does. But largeness and smallness are constitutive of inequality. Yes, they are. So do largeness and smallness too belong to this one? It looks that way. Yet largeness and smallness always stand apart from each other. Certainly. So there is always something between them. There is. And can you mention anything between them other than equality? No, just that. Therefore whatever has largeness and smallness also has equality, since it is between them, apparently. The one, if it is not, would have, as it seems, a share of equality, largeness and smallness. So it seems. Furthermore, it must also somehow partake of being. How is that? It must be in the state we describe. For if it is not so, we wouldn't speak truly when we say that the one is not. But if we do speak truly, it is clear that we say things that are. Isn't that so? It is indeed so. And since we claim to speak truly, we must claim also to speak of things that are, necessarily. Therefore, as it seems, the one is a not being. For if it is not to be a not being, but is somehow to give up its being in relation to not being, it will straightway be a being. Absolutely. So if it is not to be, it must have being, and not being as a bond in regard to its not being, just as, in like manner, what is must have not being what is not, in order that it, in its turn, may completely be. This is how what is would most of all be, and what is not would not be. On the one hand, by what is, if it is completely to be, partaking of being in regard to being a being, and of not being in regard to being a not being. And on the other hand, by what is not, if in its turn what is not is completely not to be, partaking of not being in regard to not being, a not being, and of being in regard to being a not being. Very true. Accordingly, since in fact what is has a share of not being, and what is not has a share of being, so too the one, since it is not, must have a share of being in regard to its not being, necessarily. Then the one, if it is not, appears also to have being, apparently, and of course not being, if in fact it is not, doubtless. Can something that is in some state not be so without changing from that state? It cannot. So everything of the sort we've described, which is both so and not so, signifies a change, doubtless, and the change is a motion, or what shall we call it? A motion. Now wasn't the one shown both to be and not to be? Yes. Therefore it appears both to be so and not so, so it seems. Therefore the one that is not has been shown also to move, since in fact it has been shown to change from being to not being. It looks that way. Yet, on the other hand, if it is nowhere among the things that are, as it isn't, if in fact it is not, it couldn't travel from one place to another. Obviously not. So it couldn't move by switching place. No, it couldn't. Nor could it rotate in the same thing, because it nowhere touches the same thing. For that which is the same is a being, and what is not cannot be in anything that is. No, it can't. Therefore the one, if it is not, would be unable to rotate in that in which it is not. Yes, you're quite right. And surely the one isn't altered from itself either, whether as something that is or as something that is not. For the argument would no longer be about the one, but about something else. If in fact the one were altered from itself, that's right. But if it isn't altered and doesn't rotate in the same thing or switch place, could it still move somehow? Obviously not. Yet, what is unmoved must enjoy repose, and what reposes must be at rest, necessarily. Therefore the one, as it seems, since it is not, is both at rest and in motion. So it seems. Furthermore, if in fact it moves, it certainly must be altered. For however something is moved, by just so much it is no longer in the same state as it was, but in a different state. Just so. Then because it moves, the one is also altered, yes, and yet, because it in no way moves, it could in no way be altered. No, it couldn't. So in so far as the one that is not moves, it is altered, but in so far as it doesn't move, it is not altered. No, it isn't. Therefore the one, if it is not, is both altered and not altered, apparently. Must not that which is altered come to be different from that it was before, and cease to be in its previous state? And must not that which is not altered neither come to be nor cease to be, necessarily? Therefore also the one, if it is not, comes to be and ceases to be, if it is altered, and does not come to be or cease to be, if it is not altered. And thus the one, if it is not, both comes to be and ceases to be, and does not come to be or cease to be. Yes, you're quite right. Let's go back again to the beginning, to see whether things will appear the same to us as they do now, or different. Indeed we must. Aren't we saying, if one is not, what the consequences must be for it? Yes. When we say is not, the words don't signify anything other than absence of being, or whatever we say is not, do they? Nothing other. When we say that something is not, are we saying that in a way it is not, but in a way it is? Or does this is not signify without qualification what is not is in no way at all, and does not in any way partake of being? Absolutely without qualification. Therefore what is not could neither be nor partake of being in any other way at all. No, it couldn't. Can coming to be and ceasing to be possibly be anything other than getting a share of being and losing it? Nothing other. But what has no share of being could neither get nor lose it. Obviously not. So the one, since it in no way is, must in no way have, release, or get a share of being. That's reasonable. So the one that is not neither ceases to be nor comes to be, since in fact it in no way partakes of being. Apparently not. So it also isn't altered in any way, for if it were to undergo this, it would then come to be and cease to be. True. And if it isn't altered, it must not move either, necessarily. And surely we won't say that what in no way is at rest, since what is at rest must always be in some same thing, in the same thing, no doubt. Thus, let's say that what is not is, in turn, never at rest or in motion. Yes, you're quite right. But, in fact, nothing that is belongs to it, for then by partaking of that, it would partake of being, clearly. So neither largeness, nor smallness, nor equality belongs to it. No, they don't. Furthermore, it would have neither likeness nor difference in kind in relation to itself or in relation to the others. Apparently not. What about this? Can the others be related to it if necessarily nothing belongs to it? They can't. So the others are neither like nor unlike it, and they are neither the same as nor different from it. No, they aren't. And again, will of that, to that, something, this, of another, to another, or time past, hereafter, or now, or knowledge, opinion, perception, count, a name, or anything else that is applicable to what is not? Not. Thus one, since it is not in any state at all. At any rate, it certainly seems to be in no state at all. Let's go on and say what properties the others must have, if one is not. Yes, let's do. They must surely be other, for if they weren't even other, we wouldn't be talking about the others. Just so. But if the argument is about the others are different. Or don't you apply the names other and different to the same thing? I do. And surely we say that the different is different from a different thing, and the other is other than another thing. Yes. So the others too, if they are to be other, have something they will be other than, necessarily. What would it be then? For they won't be other than the one, if it is indeed not. No, they won't. So they are other than each other, since that alternative remains for them, or else to be other than nothing? That's right. So they each are other than each other as multitudes, for they couldn't be so as ones, if one is not. But each mass of them, as it seems, is unlimited in multitude, and if you take what seems to be the smallest, in an instant, just as in a dream, instead of seeming to be one, it appears many, and instead of very small, immense in relation to the bits chopped from it. That's quite right. The others would be other than each other as masses of this sort if they are other, and if one is not. Quite so. Well then, won't there be many masses, each appearing but not being one, if in fact one is not to be? Just so. And there will seem to be a number of them, if in fact each seems to be one, although being many. Certainly. And among them some appear even and some odd, although not really being so, if in fact one is not to be. Yes, you're quite right. Furthermore, the smallest two, we say, will seem to be among them, but this appears many and large in relation to each of its many, because they are small, doubtless. And each mass will be conceived to be equal to its many small bits, for it could not in appearance shift from greater to less, until it seems to come to the state in between, and this would be an appearance of equality. That's reasonable. Now won't it appear to have a limit in relation to another mass, but itself to have no beginning, limit, or middle in relation to itself? Why is that? Because whenever you grasp any bit of them in thought as being a beginning, middle, or end, before the beginning another beginning always appears, and after the end a different end is left behind, and in the middle others more in the middle than the middle but smaller, because you can't grasp each of them as one, since the one is not. Very true. So every being that you grasp in thought must, I take it, be chopped up and dispersed, because surely without oneness it would always be grasped as a mass. Of course. So must not such a thing appear one to a person dimly observing from far off, but to a person considering it keenly from close up? Must not each one appear unlimited in multitude, if in fact it is deprived of the one, if it is not? Indeed, most necessarily. Thus the others must each appear unlimited, and as having a limit, and one and many, if one is not. Things other than the one are. Yes, they must. Won't they also seem to be both like and unlike? Why is that? Just as to someone standing at a distance, all things in a painting, appearing one, appear to have a property the same, and to be like? Certainly. But when the person comes closer they appear many and different, and by the appearance of the different in kind and unlike themselves. Just so. So the masses must also appear both like and unlike themselves and each other. Of course. Accordingly, if one is not and many are, the many must appear both the same as and different from each other, both in contact and separate from themselves, both moving with every motion and in every way at rest, both coming to be and ceasing to be, and neither. And surely everything of that sort, which it would now be easy enough for us to go through. Very true indeed. Let's go back to the beginning once more and say what must be the case if one is not, things other than the one are. Yes, let's do. Well, the others won't be one, obviously not, and surely there won't be many either, since oneness would also be present in things that are many, for if none of them is one, they are all nothing, so they also couldn't be many. True. If oneness isn't present in the others are neither many nor one. No, they aren't. Nor even do they appear one or many. Why? Because the others have no communion in any way at all with any of the things that are not, and none of the things that are not belongs to any of the others. Things that are not have no part. True. So no opinion or any appearance of what is not belongs to the others, nor is not being conceived in any way at all in the case of the others. Yes, you're quite right. So if one is not, none of the others is conceived to be one or many, since without oneness it is impossible to conceive of many. Yes, impossible. Therefore, if one is not, the others neither are nor are conceived to be one or many. It seems not. So they aren't like or unlike either. No, they aren't. And indeed, they are neither the same nor different, neither in contact nor separate, nor anything else that they appeared to be in the argument we went through before. The others neither are nor appear to be any of those things, if one is not. True. Then, if we were to say, to sum up, if one is not, nothing is. Wouldn't we speak correctly? Absolutely. Let us then say this, and also that, as it seems, whether one is or is not, It and the others both are and are not, and both appear and do not appear, all things in all ways, both in relation to themselves and in relation to each other. Very true.